Highway 95, 11:52 p.m. Screams collided with sirens. Four vehicles lay mangled across the interstate, headlights shattered, steel twisted into snarling shapes. Windshields blown out, glass sparkling like broken stars in the floodlights. Tires spun uselessly in the air. One sedan had flipped onto its roof, another was split down the side like torn fabric. Blood soaked the pavement in thin trails. The scent of antifreeze, oil, and smoke turned the summer air sour. A woman shrieked from somewhere near the guardrail, her voice torn raw. "She's losing blood. Somebody help her." Paramedics were already on scene, shouting over radios. "Pediatric trauma. Multiple code reds. Air evac requested now." Their hands moved fast, but they couldn't hide the tension. One of the newer EMTs stood frozen beside a motionless child, unsure where to begin. That's when she appeared. Unmarked navy uniform. Hair pulled tight beneath a plain cap. No insignia. No introduction. Just a calm presence cutting through the chaos like a scalpel. She dropped to her knees beside the child. No hesitation. She opened his airway. Felt the failing breath. Pulled a sterile field from her kit, her own kit, not standard issue. Threaded in four with a smooth, practiced motion. Inserted a needle between the ribs. A hiss of air escaped. Blood rose, too much of it, but her face didn't change. Another medic stepped forward, confused. "Ooh, who is she?" "She's not with us," someone whispered. But she didn't look up. She worked in silence. Eyes moving from monitor to wound to airway, back to vitals. She cut a line into the chest and inserted a decompression tube, then stabilized the torso with field dressings she had pulled from her own bag. "Military issue." Her voice finally broke the stillness. Calm. Precise. "Prep airlift." One pediatric thoracic puncture relieved. BP rising. Respiratory steady. ETA 8 minutes. Another medic, Jack, stared in disbelief. "That's not civilians don't." "She's doing field surgery," Renee muttered, stepping back. Where the hell did she learn that? The woman didn't answer. She never did. Her name was Sarah Miller. 3 years ago, she joined Glenridge Emergency Services. No one remembered much about the interview, just that she had a calmness that made you trust her. She spoke little, offered no small talk. Passed every test. Took every shift offered. She wore her uniform with almost too much precision. At first, everyone thought she was ex-military. The way she folded her gear. As she checked her rig twice, then a third time. No idle talk before calls. No music on long drives. Just silence and a focus that made others uncomfortable. Jack once joked she probably ironed her socks. She didn't laugh. She didn't deny it either. But what unnerved people more were her hands. They didn't move like a paramedic's. They moved like a surgeon's. Sarah double-checked every airway tube, every tourniquet. Cleaned her equipment to surgical standards. Even carried a trauma scalpel in her side pouch. Not regulation, but never questioned because she used it with such precision that no one dared ask. In the break room, the others talked about their weekends. She listened. Sometimes smiled, but never spoke about her own. Once Renee pressed. Asked where she'd worked before. "Here and there," Sarah said. And that was all. But if you followed the scars on her arms, not loud but visible, you could trace another life. The faint burn on her wrist. A long pale cut across her forearm, healed with military neatness. Too straight for an accident. Too old for recent memory. Jack saw the old scars one night during a shift change. Said nothing. Just looked away. People started calling her, overtrained, behind her back. Said she was too serious, too by the book for civilian work. The shift captain, Mark Lanning, once took her aside. "You're a good medic, Sarah. But this isn't combat medicine. Dial it down, okay? You make the others nervous." She nodded. But she didn't change. She'd come from a different world. One with no room for nerves. Years ago, Sarah had worn a different uniform, tan fatigues, body armor strapped tight. She'd served in the U.S. Army Combat Medical Corps. First Afghanistan. Then Iraq. Then an unmarked desert border near Syria. 3 deployments. Her title? Technically, Field Medic, Surgical Unit, Forward Operating Base 17. But inside the wire, among the wounded and the ones who kept coming back with shrapnel in their lungs, they called her something else. They called her Document. She had performed thoracostomies in the dark, under fire. Sutured arteries by flashlight and burning wreckage. Held pressure on a soldier's femoral bleed for 28 minutes while the chopper circled, trying to find a place to land. One life in her hands. 2 more watching. She didn't blink. She never called herself a surgeon, but the men she saved did. After her 3rd deployment, Sarah returned stateside. Honorably discharged. No parade. No speech. Just a folder with recommendations and a quiet thank you. She applied to Glenridge Emergency Services under her civilian certifications. Left her military background off the application. It wasn't shame. It was silence. The kind soldiers carry when they know no one's asking the right questions. In Glenridge, that silence continued. No one asked. So she said nothing. Let them assume. Let them roll their eyes when she rechecked vitals or triple sterilized her bag. She had made peace with it. Almost. Until Highway 95. That night, everything she'd kept buried came to the surface, not by choice but necessity. The child she treated on the highway had a collapsed lung. A puncture wound along the side. No breath sounds. EMTs didn't carry chest tubes. She did. Because she'd seen too many kids die waiting. She intubated him in the field. Controlled the bleed. Threaded a line and kept him alive through the worst part of the transport. By the time the airlift arrived, the chopper team hesitated. Who did this? Sarah didn't answer. Just handed off the chart, nodded once, and stepped back into the shadows of the wreck. Renee stood still, watching her. Jack whispered, "This isn't standard training. She shouldn't know how to do that." But the child lived. 3 others too, stabilized in those first chaotic moments. Because someone knew how to act. The next morning in the ER, Dr. Patel, a trauma surgeon with 20 years in the field, read the incoming patient reports. Who treated these 3? He asked, scanning vitals that looked too clean, too precise. Jack hesitated. Looked toward Sarah, standing quietly by the locker room door, sipping black coffee. She did, he said. Sarah. Dr. Patel turned toward her. You've done field surgery? Her reply was even. Army Medical Unit. 3 deployments. Dr. Patel stared at her for a long moment. Then nodded slowly. You're not just a paramedic, he said. You're the reason they're alive. She didn't want recognition. But it came anyway. By morning, word had spread through the Glenridge EMS station. Jack couldn't stop talking about it, how she opened the child's airway, how she stayed calm through the chaos. Renee defended her when the shift captain raised his eyebrows. She saved that boy's life, Mark, Renee said. Mark Lanning folded his arms. I'm not saying she didn't. But bypassing protocol? Using gear not issued by the service. She knew what she was doing, Renee replied quietly. And nobody else did. Still, he filed a report. He had to. That's how systems work. Policy first. Risk mitigation. Legal review. But the hospital was different. Dr. Patel called her into the trauma office. Sit, he said, motioning to the chair. His voice was softer than usual. We've reviewed the cases. Every procedure you performed was textbook accurate. You kept 3 patients alive who likely wouldn't have made it to the ER otherwise. Sarah nodded. Said nothing. He paused, eyes searching her face. Why didn't you tell anyone? She looked at her hands. They don't ask. Patel sighed. They should have. You don't belong in the shadows, Sarah. Not anymore. But the praise was quiet. No ceremony. No formal acknowledgement from the service. That wasn't how Glenridge worked. In the locker room later that week, Jack patted her shoulder as he passed. You ever do that again, he said, just give me a warning so I don't faint. She smiled. Barely. That evening, the boy's mother came to the station. Her hands shook as she held a card. I wanted to thank the medic who treated my son, she said. Sarah was on call, outside cleaning the ambulance rig. She didn't hear her name until the mother turned and saw her. It was you, she said, stepping forward. Sarah nodded once. The woman reached out and took her hand. Her voice cracked. He's going to be okay. Sarah said nothing. Just squeezed her hand, then returned to scrubbing bloodstains from the gurney. But not everyone was grateful. In the weeks that followed, the whispers began again. This time different. Louder. She thinks she's better than us. Field medic, huh? Probably just trying to play hero. She should have stayed in the military. Even the shift captain grew colder. He didn't say much, but his tone changed. Her schedule became less favorable. Nights. Doubles. Remote areas. She didn't complain. One evening after a long shift, she stopped by a corner store to grab coffee. Still in uniform, tired. A man in line behind her muttered, guess anyone can wear those blues now. Even YouTube-trained hacks. The cashier chuckled. Yeah, she probably thinks she's house or something. Sarah didn't respond. Just paid and left. Outside, the night was cold and silent. Her breath visible. She stood beside the ambulance for a long time, one hand resting on the rig. The city lights flickered against the windshield. She'd been in real fire zones. Watched men bleed out in sand. Saved others with nothing but a clamp and a prayer. Yet here she was questioned over a chest tube, doubted for saving lives. The irony wasn't lost on her. The next morning at the Glenridge VA Center, she sat in the back row of a support group for transitioning veterans. She didn't speak, just listened. But after the session ended, a retired Navy medic, older and heavyset, approached her. "Sarah Miller?" he asked. She nodded. "Doc Miller," he clarified, his eyes narrowing. She looked up. "Yeah," she said. "That was me." He nodded, slow and respectful. "I was at Forward Operating Base 17. Heard about you." "We all did. You kept the whole squad alive during that minefield run. You were a ghost story document. Nobody ever saw you, but everyone knew you'd been there." She didn't reply. He clapped her gently on the shoulder. "Glad you made it back." She sat there a long time after he left. She didn't feel like she had made it back. Not really. That afternoon, she returned to the station. The hallways felt colder. Conversations stopped when she walked past. On the radio, someone made a crack about Dr. Sarah, and the laughter came through loud and clear. She kept walking. That night, another call came in, single vehicle rollover, rural road, 20 minutes out. She drove in silence. Jack rode beside her, unusually quiet. When they arrived, it was a teenage girl alone. Broken femur. Internal bleeding. Sarah moved fast, assessing the damage, her voice steady as she gave orders. Jack followed. No questions this time. Just obedience. As the helicopter lifted off, the flight medic looked at Sarah and said, "Thanks for the clean prep. Saves us time up there." She nodded. That was the job. You save people and they forget your name. You make no noise. You leave no mark. But the body breathes again. And that has to be enough. Until it isn't. It was a Thursday when it happened. End of a long shift. She hadn't even had time to change out of her uniform, blue Glenridge EMS shirt, faded name tag, dark pants stained from fieldwork. She stopped by the grocery store on her way home. Just bread and black coffee, maybe eggs. The fluorescent lights hummed. Everything felt ordinary. She stood quietly in the express lane. Ahead of her, two teenagers bought energy drinks and jerky, their backpacks slung low. Behind her, an older woman glanced at her uniform and turned away with a look that wasn't quite disdain, but wasn't kindness either. Sarah held her items. Waited. When it was her turn, the cashier, a young man with an oversized polo and a lazy grin, raised his eyebrows. "Long day, Doc?" She didn't answer. The teenager behind her laughed. "You look like one of those fake medics in TV shows. All serious and stiff." The cashier joined in. "Probably learned everything from Grey's Anatomy. You gonna prescribe Advil next?" Laughter. Just loud enough to sting. Sarah handed over her card. Still silent. That was when the man behind her spoke. "Her hands aren't fake," he said. The cashier blinked. "What?" "I know those hands," the man repeated. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the noise. Slow. Weathered. Firm. Sarah turned slightly. The man was in his 70s, maybe older. Wore a worn veteran's cap with faded gold lettering 3rd Infantry Division. His back curved a little. Eyes cloudy but steady. He looked at Sarah like she was someone he remembered from a lifetime ago. "You flew into Helmand in '09, he said, voice clearer now. "Blackout run. Triple medevac. One of the birds got hit before it cleared the ridge." Sarah said nothing, but she remembered. The mission. The chaos. The wounded. The way the heat curled the air around the chopper as they hovered over a burning village. She had climbed out the side with a trauma kit and no cover, running toward 2 Marines pinned under rubble. "You carried out my corpseman," the old man said. His chest was gone. "I thought he was dead. You stitched him long enough to breathe. He made it. Had 2 kids after that." Silence stretched. The teenage cashier's mouth hung open. The man stepped forward, voice harder now. "Don't laugh at people like her. Not when you've never seen a war zone. Not when you've never heard a man scream with half his leg gone and no morphine left." He turned to Sarah. "Don't let them make you invisible." She nodded once. Her throat tightened. The store was silent now. Nobody laughed. Nobody moved. When Sarah walked out, the bread in her arms felt heavier than before. She sat in her car for a while, keys untouched in the ignition. The night pressed in, soft and humid. For a moment, she thought of her surgical team overseas, Ramirez, Cho, Danning, all gone separate ways now. She missed them. Not for the war. Not for the adrenaline. But because they had known who she was without needing to ask. That night, she pulled an old box from the back of her closet. Opened it. Inside were photos dusty, curled at the edges. Her team, squinting in the sun. Faces smeared with sand and blood. Laughter frozen in grainy film. In the corner of one photo, someone had written in faded Sharpie, "DOC Sarah, saves more than God." She didn't cry, but she kept the box on her nightstand after that. 2 weeks later, a quiet change began. Dr. Patel invited her to join a trauma symposium at the regional hospital. Said her field techniques could teach a few things to the surgical interns. She agreed reluctantly. Didn't speak much. But when she did, people listened. Then came a call from the state paramedic board. They wanted her to help develop new field care protocols. Her name was recommended by Jack, it turned out. "You saved my nephew," he told her. "Didn't know it was you till I saw the name on the intake sheet." Sarah just nodded. Recognition came. Not loud. Not public. But real. She was asked to mentor new EMTs. She said yes. And slowly the laughter stopped. Not because it was forbidden, but because people started remembering what she had done when it mattered. When a call came in now, the shift captain didn't question her kit. Didn't ask about her extra gear. Just said, "Take the lead." Respect, earned the hard way, didn't vanish once it arrived. Still, she never sought the spotlight. Refused the local news interview. Declined the award offer. Said she was just doing the job. But in the back of her locker, under a folded trauma pack, she taped a note. A line from her old field CO, "Don't wait for people to understand. Just keep saving them anyway." A month passed. The story of Highway 95 faded into memory for most. But not for Dr. Patel. Not for the boy's family. Not for the handful of new EMTs who watched her every move now, trying to learn without asking too many questions. Sarah still rode the rig. Still cleaned her own gear. Still folded her uniform with precision each night. She had no interest in becoming a symbol. But symbols don't choose themselves. It happened quietly, as most important things do. The town held an EMS Appreciation Day, tents and coffee, a folding stage, a podium. Kids climbed into parked ambulances, parents clapped politely at short speeches. Names were called for service awards. Years. Milestones. Sarah stood at the edge of the crowd sipping weak coffee. She wasn't on the list. Didn't expect to be. Then Dr. Patel took the microphone. He wasn't on the schedule either. He said little. Just a few lines. About a night when protocol bent, but lives were saved. About a medic whose name most of them knew, but whose past few understood. Then he called her up. The applause was hesitant at first. Sparse. But it grew. Sarah stepped forward slowly, unsure. She didn't take the microphone. Just nodded. Dr. Patel handed her a plaque. Plain wood. No gold. The inscription read, "For actions beyond expectation and the courage not to wait for permission." She didn't speak. Didn't need to. Her silence said more than most speeches. Later that day, she walked home. Still in uniform, still tired. Stopped at the corner store again. The same cashier from before rang her up. This time, he didn't laugh. Just asked, "You're the one from the crash, right?" She paused. Nodded once. He didn't speak after that. Just handed her the receipt. "Thank you," he said, voice low. She left without a word. The world didn't change. But small things did. Whispers turned into quiet respect. Doubts turned into questions. How would Sarah handle this became something new EMTs asked in training. And then came the letter. Typed on state letterhead. From the Office of Veteran Affairs. They'd heard about her through Patel, through the trauma symposium, through word of mouth. They wanted her to help build a pilot program, a bridge for former combat medics transitioning into civilian EMS. Help them find language for what they already knew. Help them translate trauma into service again. She read it twice. Didn't answer immediately. Instead, she drove to a field hospital 2 hours outside town. Volunteered for the weekend shift. Took vitals. Taught interns how to assess shock before the sign screamed. She went home and wrote yes. The program launched 6 weeks later. She didn't put her name on the banner, but her fingerprints were on every protocol. Her life became a pattern of duality, still writing calls at Glenridge EMS, still packing her own rig, still working past her shift. but also mentoring quietly, helping veterans find their place again. Not in ceremony but in skill. In hands that could heal even after they'd only known harm. One evening she returned to the station late. A new recruit had taken her rig out for the first time. When he returned, he looked shaken. Said he'd lost a pulse on the scene, panicked, called for backup too late. Sarah listened. Didn't correct. Just handed him a black marker. Show me, she said. Together, they mapped the scene on the whiteboard. She traced his choices step by step. Pointed where the mistake lived. Then showed him where the save could have happened. Next time, don't wait, she said. You know what to do. He nodded, eyes wide. Grateful. She didn't add more. Some lessons stick better in quiet. Later, as she gathered her things, Renee walked by. You're starting to sound like a teacher. I'm not, Sarah replied. Renee smiled. You don't have to try. You just are. That night, Sarah drove home under a wide, silent sky. The roads were dark, the town still. Her phone buzzed with a new message from another vet in the transition program. Made my first solo run today. No hesitation. Use the method you taught. Patient stabilized. Thank you. She didn't reply, but she saved the message. When she reached her apartment, she pulled the old photo box from her nightstand. Added a new photo, her and her first class of trainees. Some wore uniforms. Others still carried the look of places they hadn't yet left behind. She tucked the photo in beside the old one. The team from Afghanistan. Their faces sunburned, smiles cracked with dust and fatigue. The photo where they'd written her nickname in faded black ink. Doc Sarah, saves more than God. She didn't believe in the nickname, but she believed in showing up, in not needing permission, and in never waiting for the world to notice before doing what mattered. The call came in late on a Friday. Cardiac arrest. Grocery store parking lot. Elderly male unresponsive. Sarah was already nearby. She rerouted and arrived within 3 minutes. The man was on the pavement, eyes wide, jaw slack. A bystander had started compressions. Sarah took over. Renee arrived seconds later. Together they worked, cycles of CPR, shock pads, airway check. After 10 minutes, they got a pulse. The ambulance arrived. As they loaded the stretcher, Sarah glanced at the bystander, a young man, maybe 20, still pale and sweating. You did good, she said. He nodded, eyes wet. He's my grandfather. Sarah placed a hand on his shoulder. He has a chance now. She didn't linger. Went back to restock the rig. The grocery manager came out, wiping his hands. He saw her, then paused. You're the one from the store a few months ago, he said. She didn't reply. He lowered his voice. I heard what that vet said about you. Still, she said nothing. He nodded. I didn't believe it. But I do now. Sarah turned to leave. Thank you, he said. She walked away. That night, in the stillness of her apartment, she opened the drawer beneath her bed, pulled out an envelope she hadn't touched in years. It held a single sheet of paper. An offer, surgeon's assistant, trauma unit, Walter Reed Medical Center. She had declined it, not out of pride, out of exhaustion, out of wanting to vanish. Back then, she believed her usefulness had an expiration date. Now she knew better. The next morning, she stood at the front of the first formal session of the Veteran Transition Program. A dozen men and women stared back at her. Some young, some gray, some trying to sit still with hands that still shook. She looked at them and saw herself. I'm not a surgeon, she said. Silence. I'm not a hero. Stillness. But I know what it feels like to come home and not know where to stand. A quiet ripple through the room. So we'll start with what you already know. How to stop bleeding. How to stay calm when no one else is. How to listen for what's not said. Someone exhaled. Sarah's voice stayed even. We're not here to teach you medicine. We're here to give your skill a name civilians understand. She paused. And we're going to make damn sure you're never invisible again. In the following weeks, the program took root. Sarah taught the way she worked, no fanfare, just method. Clarity. Purpose. The town changed quietly. New signs at the EMS station marked a training wing. Funded by the VA. Sarah's name wasn't on them, but those who knew, knew. And then one day, on a quiet afternoon, the boy she'd saved on Highway 95 visited. Now walking, talking, taller than before. His mother stood beside him, tears in her eyes. He wants to meet the woman who saved his life. Sarah knelt so they were eye to eye. The boy looked at her. Are you a doctor? She hesitated. "No," she said. "Just someone who didn't wait." He nodded, serious in a way children rarely are. Then he hugged her. Later that night, Sarah drove back to Highway 95, parked near the edge of the shoulder, where the skid marks had long faded. She stood there alone, hands in her jacket pockets. The wind was cold, the road quiet. She didn't say anything, just looked, and remembered. She reached into her jacket, pulled out a photo, her surgical team from Afghanistan, the old one, the one with the dust and the fading ink. She tucked it beneath a small roadside tree, weighted it with a flat stone. No plaque, no name, just memory. Then she walked back to her rig, started the engine, and drove into the night. Today, Sarah still rides with Glenridge EMS. She teaches twice a week, field trauma crisis stabilization, combat triage repurpose for civilian life. Her program now trains medics across 3 counties. No press releases, no titles, just names on clipboards and lives quietly redirected. In her locker hangs the same uniform. In the bottom drawer, her own field kit still packed tight, ready. But beside it, taped to the metal, is a photo. Her surgical team 2010, Afghanistan, dirt under their nails, blood on their sleeves, all of them laughing. She doesn't look at it often, but she never takes it down. Sometimes on cold mornings she arrives early, before the others. She walks the rows of ambulances checking gear. Not because she has to, because it matters. And when a new recruit joins, someone always pulls them aside and whispers, "Watch her hands. You'll learn more in 10 minutes than in a year of school." But Sarah never boasts. She never reminds people what she did. Because some legends don't announce themselves. They just act when it matters most. And when the world forgets, they keep going. Because the uniform may change, but the mission doesn't.